Hello, and welcome to the Dr. Toomer Talk Show. I am your host, Dr. Catherine Toomer, my family medicine and community health physician, and founder of Total Weight Care Institute. And I help people with metabolic mastery, and particularly when it comes to weight management, but really just about anything that causes metabolic dysregulation. So I'm going to fix my screen here. And so what I'll do is try to keep it short. And at the end, I will answer questions about this or prior videos. If you like this video and you think it's helpful, please go to my YouTube channel, subscribe, and share this with family and friends, and ask them to subscribe as well. So, good evening, and let me know who you are and where you're listening from. Hello, Marcy. Greetings from Barbados. Thank you for joining. So I'm just going to jump right into this because I've actually was asked to, and this is something also you can do. I was asked to do this topic tonight. And if you have other topics that you're interested in and you want to hear a good explanation as to what it is, you can write to me at help@drtoomer.com and I will do a topic talk on it. And that's what happened today. Hello, Jennifer from Nebraska. Thank you for joining. So, intermittent fasting. Hear a lot about it. People ask about it. I get it almost at every consultation asking, should I be intermittent fasting? And essentially, it's not unusual to hear that question, partly because it's now been sort of synonymous with dieting. However, intermittent fasting is a timing strategy. It's not a diet. It's simply a way of eating based around time. Now, I have kept some notes just so that I won't forget and get all my points in, because sometimes I will. So one of the things, though, is we've always fasted. Fasting isn't something new. We're just using it in a different way. And we call it intermittent fasting when in fact it's something we've always done. Breakfast is called breakfast because it's breaking a fast. We fast through the night, in the evenings and through the night. And when we wake up, we break that fast with breakfast. So fasting isn't anything new. It's just how it's being used is a little bit different. And it's being used intentionally. People think it is for metabolic health. And one of the reasons why I do talk about it so much is because that is what my specialty, my area of expertise is metabolic management and metabolic health. And so I talk about it a lot. And then I'll keep my opinions about intermittent fasting until the end. But you can keep your questions ready and you can write them into the chat and I'll see them and I will talk to you after we're done. So intermittent fasting. What is intermittent fasting? So essentially what intermittent fasting is, it's a timing of when you eat, not what you eat. Diet is kind of what you eat. Intermittent fasting is when. And there are different types of intermittent fasting. The most common one is 16, 8 hours of eating, 16 hours of fasting. And so you create an eating window. Now, there's a sort of circadian baseline, which you normally go by, which is 12 and 12, because there's 24 hours in a day. So we break up 12 and 12. And so we eat for 12 hours. We don't eat for 12 hours. There's gentle intermittent fasting, where you fast for 14 hours and eat for 10 hours. And that is, something that people who are would like to intermittent fast will kind of gently ease into it. There are also some people who fast by the day. They fast for, they'll now not eat for a day or two, and then they fast for 2 days or so, and then they'll eat for 5 days, then fast for 2, then eat for 5. So remember, this is something more about when you eat and less about what you eat. And so I'm just kind of looking at my notes here. So why has this become so popular? Mainly it's because it's sort of been indicated that intermittent fasting helps with hormonal levels, that it lowers insulin. The insulin is the hormone that causes fat production. And so the thought is if you intermittent fast, that you'll regulate your insulin and therefore you regulate your fat production. However, many times when people intermittent fast, they also eat differently. And so it's often their change in eating habits that actually is what's causing the weight loss and not necessarily the fasting itself. The other thing that it does is it depletes our glycogen stores. What glycogen is a substance in our liver where we store energy. And when we haven't eaten, our body releases glucose, which is what our brain uses to regulate, and it will release it into the blood, and therefore will, during times of fasting, it will do that. There is a possibility where you can fast and eat in rhythm with your hormonal levels, but most of us have no idea what those are and when they are, and it's really just hit or miss. There's also some biological and behavioral drivers. It provides structure to a lot of people in a process. So when they call themselves wanting to get healthy, it will give them something to do. It will give them something to focus on. It is a lot simpler than calorie counting. And so it's something that people will do. They'll intermittent fast and they'll focus. But there's also this cultural thing where, we feel like we have to suffer to prove that we're trying. And so when it comes to our health and when it comes particularly to weight loss, we will do things that are difficult really for no reason, but just simply because that's what we are told we're supposed to do, that it's not supposed to be easy, whatever a process is. And so that's often why people fast as well. It does reduce some of the decision making, like when you're going to eat, when you're not going to eat. So it's like a certain level of rigidity, but it's very difficult to implement in real life because most people are not on that strict of a time every single day. But what people do and how it's done is that it is, you create a window and you eat during that window. It's really important, though, during that window that you get all of your nutrients and you get all of your protein, particularly your protein, and all of your hydration. Now, some people, when they fast, they still drink outside of that fast. It's only a food fast that they will engage in during that time. And it works for some people who, particularly those who may have eating disorders, not so much who are binge eaters or who are grazers or people who tend to eat all day long. But there are people who shouldn't intermittent fast. One, if you're pregnant, if you're breastfeeding, if you're perimenopausal, and I'll explain why later. If you've had any history of an eating disorder, intermittent fasting really is a certain type of disordered eating, and it can sort of tip over into an eating disorder if not careful. So if you have a history of eating disorders, it's probably not a good idea. If you're older and you're frail and you're worried about maintaining your muscle, probably not a good idea. If you're someone who uses their muscle a lot, they have a high energy expenditure. So if you're constantly working out, if you have a lot of muscle, and fasting is probably not a good idea because your muscle needs the energy of food in order to be maintained. And also, people with high stress or poor sleep probably shouldn't intermittent fast. And the reason for this is the same reason why it's not recommended in perimenopause, and mainly because when you fast, particularly for long periods of time, when you go long periods of time without eating, your cortisol, your stress hormone, can go up. And when you're in perimenopause, you don't have the hormones to keep it in check. And if you're already in a high stress situation and you add more stress to that situation, what happens is that it just causes more problems, the cortisol issues. And so it's not about eating less food. It's just about eating in less of amount of time. So you still have to maintain the number of calories that are required for the day. So that is some of the pros, and I'm going to kind of making sure that I have all of my points in. So the potential benefits, some of the pros are it can reduce mindless eating. If you're someone who tends to eat without paying attention and you graze all day long, it can actually help with that. You may have some short-term sensitivity to insulin. So if you're insulin resistant, which many people are walking around who have, and that insulin resistance makes it easy for them to gain fat and have difficulty losing it. Insulin sensitivity sometimes is helpful, but it's temporary. It usually doesn't last as very long. Sometimes also it helps with decision fatigue. If you know that you're only going to eat between a certain amount of time, you don't have to worry about eating outside of that time. It actually makes it easier. Some people need that regimen. They need those restraints, and it makes it easier for them. And then for some people, it improves their hunger awareness. If you eat all the time, then you never learn the way your body responds to not eating. And so when you don't eat, it helps you understand better what your body does, how you feel when you haven't eaten. So you recognize your hunger cues. So if when not intermittent fasting or when not fasting, you understand when it's important to eat and when you don't really need to eat because it's not really hungry. You'd be surprised how many people do not have that cue, who don't really understand what the sensation is that is hunger. And so much of the benefit of intermittent fasting actually comes from the change of behavior, not necessarily the fasting itself. Because when you fast, other things kind of go along with it, and you tend to eat at very specific times. You usually pay more attention to how you're eating and what you're eating. And so the combination of that is often where the benefit comes from. So a lot of people say intermittent fasting, I lost X amount of weight. Well, lots of times it's because they changed how they were eating during that intermittent fasting. And that's really what caused the change. But it's also very important to understand the cons of fasting, intermittent fasting. One is under eating. It can lead to starvation. And when your brain thinks you're starving, it slows down your metabolism. It also makes your body more prone to make fat out of food that you've eaten. So if you undereat, it actually is counterproductive, especially if your intermittent fasting is a way of trying to lose weight, because it really will actually make your body more prone to gaining. If you intermittent fast and you don't do it properly, you can actually be malnourished. There are certain nutrients that you need daily. And if you eat within such a short window that you don't get all of those nutrients in, then that leads to malnutrition. The other is that it causes hormonal disruption, particularly in women. So when your hormones are fluctuating all over the place during perimenopause, it's probably not a good idea unless there are some other behavioral things that go along with that. It's not so much for hormone regulation, it's really more for behavioral regulation. And it's usually those behavioral changes that actually lead to the benefits. But the other is it also can lead to binging. If you fast for a certain amount of time and you reach starvation mode and then you start eating, it's very easy to overeat during the window that you are eating. And it's very difficult to keep track sometimes of what you are eating and how much you're eating. And so it can lead to binging. It also, when you have such a regimen of when you can eat and when you can't eat, it really takes what should be an enjoyable process, a natural process, and you become preoccupied. So it becomes a preoccupation with food and when you can eat and when you can't, as opposed to just enjoying your day and enjoying your time. The other is with intermittent fasting, there's this attitude, it's all or nothing. There's no gray. There's no flexibility. There's no pivoting. And so when you have that level of regimen, it really sets you up for failure often. And that has psychological impact, has a psychological impact, particularly when you're in a process that, if you feel it's all or nothing, then you feel you failed. When in fact, you haven't really failed. It's just the process isn't right for you. So with intermittent fasting, sometimes it can be so rigid with the eating window versus the not eating, or the fasting and then the eating window, that it removes all enjoyment around food, and therefore the risks outweigh the benefit sometimes. So who can it help? Now, there are some people who it does help. And those are people who, like I said, who graze, who eat all day long and just need a stopping point. They need to give themselves a stopping point as to when to stop eating. Or for people who are night eaters. And so that can also become a problem if you tend to eat late at night. So if you kind of cut off your eating at a particular time, then that can also be helpful. Those people who just want something simple, they want a structure, they need that structure. And some people are that way. They don't like the flexibility. They don't like the pivoting. And so having that structure can be helpful. Early on in the process, insulin sensitivity can go up. So if you're insulin resistant and you're early in your insulin resistant journey or development, it can be helpful. Once you've gone beyond a certain point, it stops. It doesn't help with insulin sensitivity to the point where it matters. Normally, who just does not help, though, are people who are chronic dieters. If you're always on some type of diet that's restrictive, or some type of diet that has you eating certain foods that don't give you all the nutrients you have during the day, intermittent fasting will actually be more harmful than helpful. It can actually become counterintuitive, and it becomes just simply starvation. And when your body starves, it generally takes the food you eat and turns it into fat to store it, because it thinks that it's not getting any more. And like I've mentioned before, it's sort of like when you eat on a regular basis, your body just burns off what it eats, what you eat. But if you don't eat on a regular basis, your body will hold on to what you've eaten. Sort of like if you're given money every single day and you know you're going to get money every single day, no matter what, you're more likely to spend it. If you're given money and you don't know when you're going to get money again, you hold on to it. Our body does the same thing with calories. And so intermittent fasting, where you don't get enough calories in the time of your eating window, can lead to that. The other, though, is when it comes to intermittent fasting, and this is one of the biggest mistakes I see people making, they wait to eat in the afternoon. They create an 8-hour window from like noon to 8 p.m. And the problem with that is, many people don't get enough, they don't have enough time to get in the calories that they need because they're working, and they may eat at lunchtime, they work all day, and then they eat in the evening around 7 or 8, and they just simply do not get all their calories in those 2 meals. But the other is that we are more sensitive to our insulin in the morning. Our body is better able to absorb nutrients from the food we eat in the morning, or shortly after waking up, I should say, depending on when that time is. And so if you push back your eating window, you lose all the benefit of when your food is being metabolized and when all the nutrients out of food. So if intermittent fasting is something that is what you want to do, your eating window should shift forward so that you start close to the time that you wake up, because that's when your body's most sensitive to insulin, and that's when you're more likely to get the nutrients out of the food that you're eating. And also our circadian rhythm, how our body sort of functions during the day, it doesn't function in the same way all day long. There's certain times of the day it does one thing, and then there's certain times of the day it does other things. And when you have that rhythm and you eat outside of that or against that, then often what happens is that your body actually does the opposite of what you want it to do. It will hold on the fat instead of getting rid of it. And so it just end by saying intermittent fasting is just a tool. It's a mechanism. It's not a miracle. It is not something it's not for everybody. There are the results of what people get from intermittent fasting. It can be obtained in a lot easier ways. And for the very few that it really is beneficial for, it is beneficial to them for a very specific reason. And trying to understand that reason is not necessarily the same for everybody else. The benefits often come from the structure and the behavioral changes, not the fasting itself. So if you're someone whose lack of structure was part of the issue that led to metabolic dysregulation and their weight gain, then having that structure would help. It's really important that when in the process that the focus is on metabolic health and a healthy relationship with food. And if any of the process, intermittent fasting, creates a system or creates a situation where you're so focused on eating and when you can't eat, then it becomes disordered. That is considered disordered eating and it is no longer healthy. So when it comes to intermittent fasting, it's really about the individual. It's not about willpower. It's about what works as a tool for that particular person. So if you cannot intermittent fast, that doesn't mean something's wrong with you. And if you want to intermittent fast, then just make sure you're getting all the nutrients you need throughout the day and that it's not disrupting your life in some other way, either work or friendships or your social life. Because like I've always said, biopsychosocial, to be healthy, you have to be healthy biologically. It has to be something that's healthy for you psychologically, and it has to be something that's also healthy for you socially. And if any one of those things are unhealthy, then it is unhealthy. So if you have any questions, now would be a good time to ask them. So as I've mentioned before, I've been trying to keep these as short as possible, not short as possible, but within 30 minutes. You know, you're busy and, you know, I respect your time. But I do want to go through and just say hello to everyone. Hi, George. Hi, Kelly. Hey, Cuz. So I'm going from 11 p.m. to 11 a.m. That means you're eating during that time or you're fasting during that time. So essentially 12 and 12 is normal eating. That's not even considered intermittent fasting. That's just considered normal. Just our normal rhythm. And that's not a bad thing. It's not bad or good. It just depends on how much of your nutrients you're getting in. And as long as you're eating what you're supposed to and getting all the nutrients you need, then it really doesn't matter what the window is. It's really if you're getting everything you need. Hello, Sherry from Brooklyn, New York. How are you? Marcy says, I'm just going to, okay, let me see. I'm going to put this up in the window. Okay. Wouldn't you have to fast for a longer time to lose a substantial amount of weight? So now I don't know if you mean over months and months and months, or if you mean over hours within a day. Either way, if it's hours within a day, that's simply starvation, and that is not healthy. If it's over years and months and whatever, it really just depends on your age and where you are in your hormonal status. If you're a woman, it really just depends on your physical activity. For anyone, it depends how much muscle you have and how you should do it. Now, to get the benefit of it, really will show itself rather quickly. And but again, there are very few situations where it's actually necessary. I mean, if you're someone who recognizes your hunger cues, if you're someone who doesn't eat, who has a hard time not eating throughout the day, like if you can just, you stop eating at a particular time and then you go to bed within a few hours, then you don't need to fast. If you know that if you get your nutrients early in the morning, and then especially if you can't eat until much, much later, then fasting is probably not a good idea, because what that does, it pushes back the optimal time to eat. And then you have a very short window between the time you start eating and the time you go to bed to get all your nutrients in. And most people just simply cannot eat the amount required, because it takes about 1,200 calories to get all the nutrients that you need each day. Most people eat about 1,500 to 1,800 calories a day. And so many people need much, much more. And so trying to fit all those calories into a short amount of time is often not realistic. And therefore, it causes some issues. So most people just end up being malnourished. Now, one thing I do want to say, there is a difference between intermittent fasting for health or for metabolic reasons, or for weight management. It's not really a good weight management tool, just to be honest, it isn't. But as opposed to spiritual fasts. Now, spiritual fasting the focus is different. When you are spiritual fasting, the whole point is to create ketones, which is what our body produces when we don't eat. If we don't eat, and our fat gets broken down, and then ketones get released. Our brain uses ketones and becomes very acute and very sharp. So if you're fasting for religious reasons, that's why religious fasts are so common, it actually sharpens your brain and helps you absorb, and especially that spiritual experience, that spiritual knowledge, more efficiently. When you fast and you're focused on food, it changes the hormone that gets released. And so basically your body responds differently when you fast because of for food reasons or metabolic reasons or diet reasons, versus when you're fasting for spiritual or religious reasons. And it's all about the hormone that gets produced in the process. Hi, Tammy in Florida. Tammy says, I'm just going to put this up here so I can read it. Tammy in Florida says, I was doing 16-8, but was feeling a little off and lightheaded in the mornings. I had just moved dinner to 2 hours earlier, so was surprised I felt bad in the morning. So you said you had moved. Yeah. So what was happening is that your energy levels were being depleted. So more than likely what happened is during that 8 hours of eating, you just simply weren't getting enough calories in. And, or the other is, and then often when people fast, they often don't drink as well. So you don't get enough fluids and you don't get enough calories. And that combination will make you very dizzy. It will make you very lightheaded. It will make you very tired. And so if you are fasting and you're tired and you feel off and lightheaded, that means you're simply not eating enough. And it's probably not a good idea. Because then it takes what should be healthy and makes it unhealthy. Any other questions? Going once, going twice. So if you have any questions and you think of them later, you can write to me at help@drtoomer.com. I'm going to see if I can pull up this banner so you can see it, there we go. So it's going along the top, help@drtoomer.com. You can write to me there. You can go to my website. There are options for making consultation appointments. There's also other things that you can look at and see if you need them. So, and then the other is, and I know I've mentioned this every single week and I haven't yet launched, but I am creating or will have a coaching group. And essentially what it will be is several hours throughout the week where you can drop in and there'll be laser coaching. You can ask any questions that you want. It can be about health, wellness, and weight management. The other is that we'll create a community so that we can interact with one another, not just on Tuesdays when we come in, but we can share recipes, share information, share, support and successes and, anything that we need within the community that will help people sort of provide for themselves what they need and provide to others what they've gained and what they need. So I'm going to pull this back. So it's help@drtoomer.com. Any other questions before we go? Let me go up to comments. I see there's 2 more. Okay. Sherry said, thank you. You're welcome, Sherry. I like your name. Thank you for all the information. It's very much appreciated. Well, thank you for coming. So again, if you found this helpful, please, and you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Dr. Toomer, or share it on your pages, share it with other people, and let them know that this is open for anybody who'd like to come and get their information. So again, I'm Dr. Catherine Toomer, and I'm going to say good night, and I will see you next Tuesday at the Dr. Toomer Talk Show right here.